Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Matthew Rhodes, and I'm one of the directors at Custom D, and I'm joined here by Julie Ryan, our managing director. In case you didn't know, Custom D build web and mobile apps for startups, and this is the third webinar in a series called Startup Stories, where we hear from clients about their journeys in startup land. Today, we're lucky enough to be talking to Danny Hui, founder of Sameview. And I'll let Danny introduce himself and what Sameview is in a minute. But I will say that it's been a pleasure working with Danny so far on what is a pretty awesome product. Whether spitballing product features together in a workshop or just talking about new ideas over ramen noodles. Danny introduced us to the best ramen bar in town. It's very important. It's been great to be along for the journey so far. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Danny has to say today. We've got some questions lined up. We've allowed about 45 minutes for the session with a bit of time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer those as they come up. Other than that, I'll hand it over to you, Danny, to tell us a bit about yourself and what Sameview is.
Thanks for having me. I guess in terms of talking about myself and what Sameview is, I guess I'll start by telling you a bit about my family. So I'm the father of 3 children, and 2 of my children have a diagnosed disability. In particular, my youngest, Monty, who's 8 years old. So Monty was born with a rare disease. And so I guess the thing you need to know about a kid like Monty is that, you know, he like all my other kids, we have all the same sort of goals and hopes and dreams for him. But to work towards those aspirations requires the support of our team. So in Monty's case, he's got somewhere between 30 to 40 different doctors and therapists and support workers and school teachers and people that are just in our lives that, some we see every week, some we see every fortnight or once a year, but they're all every one of those people plays an important part of his team. Now, the hard thing about it all is that those people find it very difficult to communicate and collaborate with each other. And so we found that particularly difficult ourselves as parents and carers. And so that is the problem that we are trying to tackle with Sameview. Sameview is an online platform that helps families like mine and also individuals to coordinate their disability care. The simplest way we could put it is that we get every person from a person's team on the same page so that they talk to each other, work with each other so that, the person and the family can achieve their goals as effectively as possible.
So you've identified what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Like, how did you actually make the leap? And go, right, so I'm going to do this.
So I guess this. I mean, I'm happy to say to people, before my son was born, like I didn't have much awareness about the disability community or the supports that are there. This amazing community of people and organisations and professionals that all work in this area. We were completely outside of it, and so before Sameview, I worked as an engineer, so not even in this field, but after Monty was born, we could see that so much of what was there to support us as a family was created just by other families and other people who in years gone by had a go themselves and then had created organizations or services or whatever that stayed on and supported other families. So for Jess, my wife, and I, once we had the idea, it just, after a while, it was just this thought that, well, we can give it a go. Like we should have a go and see if we could also do something that could put something back into this amazing community.
I did 30 to 40 different providers. I didn't realize it was actually that you were dealing with that many. Is that pretty typical?
So the numbers add up no matter what the diagnosis might be. I would say that in Monty's case, it's probably a little bit higher. And I guess it's timely because Rare Disease Day, International Rare Disease Day, is coming up. And so for kids like Monty, particularly like Monty, that have supports both, say, inside the hospital system, so to speak, like clinicians in the hospital systems, but then also outside, like our therapists and support workers and things like that. That team then gets just a little bit bigger. But for most families we see, they'll have, in the case of, say, a child, they'll have a pediatrician, they'll have a support worker, there'll be maybe an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, physiotherapist. If they're at school, you've got their learning support, their school teacher, and then, say, the other family members that are involved as well. And so you could see those numbers just climb pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Do you think that the health providers feel the same pain as you do in terms of that coordination of care?
Yeah, it's a well-known and discussed problem really in all sectors of care, to be honest, whether it's aged care, chronic disease care, disability care, doesn't matter. It's that communication issue is there. We find that some areas, some sectors can do a little bit better. So say when you're inside the hospital, if you're an inpatient, there are systems within the hospital walls that allow those doctors and nurses and clinicians to talk to each other. But once you sort of cross those sector boundaries, like, say, walking out of the hospital, that's where communication is really, really difficult. So say getting, one of your professionals from inside a hospital to talk to, say, like a school teacher, there are no systems, apart from email, that really allow effective communication that way.
Well, I guess you come up against sort of privacy laws as well, like that. That seems to be a fairly difficult aspect to traverse.
yeah, definitely. Look, anything like this where there's communication of personal information, privacy, security is top of mind, and as you and your team will know, that's always at the forefront of what we think about. We, in terms of that area, our principles are very much focused on giving the family, the individual, the control over who gets to see the information and who they share their information with, which also models where our disability support system is going as well, in terms of what we call that choice and control over who supports you and who you essentially might spend your funding on.
So you're really a user here, Danny. Like, the best startups usually come from actual problems with an urgent need to be solved. So you being the dad, Monty, like, this inside out. But how did you sort of validate the idea early on? Like, did you talk to people? How did you know that it was going to work for others, and this your idea of the solution was going to have some traction and going to work?
Yeah. So look, before we decided to jump in full time, when we first came up with the idea, it's probably like other ideas that people come up with and go, well, maybe that's something or nothing. But initial validation was actually just meeting other families that talked about the same problem. That then sort of got us to the point, like, actually, this thought that we just had one evening isn't nothing. It might be something. And then when we did start, it was just lots of, interviews and discussions with families first. Families were very approachable, I guess, because we're one of them, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, we started to get more support from the professional community as well. And then just through those discussions, and, that really helped us to validate the problem and sort of guide us on sort of where we needed to go. That being said, being an engineer, one thing I have had to learn is not to, base it on our experience. I feel very fortunate that I live the same lives as essentially like my customers. I'm really proud of that. But I do have to be really careful that we don't just build something that's great for me. It's as an engineer, it's one of those things I've had to learn. It's so tempting to just build something and from start to finish, based on everything that I reckon, and then nobody loves it. So,
and I think it's easier too, in a way, if you've got the skills, development skills, to kind of build something rather than to necessarily go out and do that hard work of talking to other people, seeing where the overlaps are, seeing where the need is. But it's crucial, like it's absolutely crucial. But it's something that's like a common pitfall, I think, for a lot of startups.
I think because it's fun to build something, right? Like, that's the fun part of starting something, and the cool part. So you get really excited. You want to build a great product and get it out there. So it is tempting to just rush ahead.
Did you find with that process of doing the validation and talking to the families, did you find was there a lot of unexpected issues, problems that came up, or was it pretty much in line with what you were thinking?
No, definitely. Like it's really sort of that you learn a lot more sort of, what would you say, nuance around how, while you might have a pretty good understanding in principle of the problem, how you might address it, you learn all the sort of the nuances of what people are thinking as you talk to them. And that sort of really then eventually turns into how, I guess, your product, your app or whatever should actually function. So how do you actually do the thing to make it?
But there's two facets to it as well, isn't there? There's the problem that you're solving, but then there's also the how do your customers and users interact with technology and apps, you know, and kind of meshing that together.
Yes, and particularly the people that you're actually trying to serve, how they want to use apps or technology is not the same as, say, another customer category. Absolutely. So you really have to I would say when you look at our app, sometimes when I speak to people who are maybe from outside, I guess, this community, and they look at it and they might question, well, why do things sort of function a certain way? And the answer is always, it's actually deliberate because our users want it that way. And it doesn't seem logical at first, but when you understand sort of what people are thinking, it does make sense.
So you validated the idea. Then what? Like, how did you make your first step forward? Like, what was after you worked out that yes, this is a need that's experienced by lots, and understanding a lot of the different nuances of other people's experience. Like, what was your next step?
Well, for me, it was getting support, particularly, with this kind of product, it's great having the family support, and that's extremely important, but it doesn't work if you don't have the engagement on the professional side, because you're counting on them all working together. So it was really important to start to get clinician involvement and get their engagement, which was actually pretty difficult. We started this about 4 years ago, and around that time, the disability sort of funding landscape in Australia was changing at the time quite rapidly. And so there was a lot of, I guess, confusion and sort of unsteadiness in the professional community. But, slowly and steadily, we started to get their support. We needed to get something out there, like a prototype, an MVP that people could test and really start to give feedback on once we had enough to build something like that. So so that was really the next step, and then sort of parallel to that, getting funding support, getting organization support, getting, in some ways, some sort of attention so that people knew about us.
Well, you've certainly done that pretty well. You've managed to secure a lot of prestigious awards and grants through your 4 years so far. Like, that's been very impressive to watch, actually, how you've managed to communicate your vision to so many other people and get the accolades for that, and therefore the promotion of your app and some funding to help you get going.
Yeah, look, it's pretty. We're very fortunate to have received such generous support from so many different people. And that stuff is hard, because there's so many incredible people out there doing things. And there's a bit of luck involved, circumstances and things like that. But we're very lucky to have had that support.
What's the saying? The harder I work, the luckier I get.
I don't know, maybe. But look, we couldn't have funding is hard. Like particularly, I don't think this is the same for every startup, right? Like particularly that early stage, pre-revenue, there isn't much funding out there, so you really have to work hard on things like grants and maybe crowdfunding and funding it yourself, of course, those kinds of things. So yeah, without that support, we would really have struggled to get to where we are.
So getting a startup off the ground is a huge time suck, and mentally fatiguing. Like how do you juggle that with the demands of your family, which are also, you have additional needs and responsibilities there as well. Like how do you kind of balance that?
So I guess a couple of things. I guess if we talk about the commitment to the startup first. So when we first had this idea, it was around the time right after sort of Monty was born, and pretty early we knew that our family demands were such that, my wife and I couldn't keep working full time, like both of us. There's so many appointments that we go to, and we still have those sort of every single week, multiple times a week. And so I started working part-time. I started contracting, and I thought maybe I could get this off the ground in the sort of the 2 days a week that I had spare for going to appointments, but maybe because I'm terrible at multitasking, I found it really hard, to get any traction during that time. And it wasn't until, I guess, our family sort of made the decision to really give this a go and to sort of change our lives so that I could do this full time, that we actually got any progress. So I think actually committing a full-time effort to it, which is really hard to say and for people to hear, because it's, there's you got to have some circumstances the right way to be able to do that. But I found it personally really difficult to get any traction until I committed full-time. But then going on to juggling that with, say, my family commitment and all that kind of stuff, I take a pretty strong view on not taking any shortcuts with, I guess, with my family and with my appointments and things like that. And it's important to know that for families like mine, kids, say in early intervention programs, one of the things that can really improve their success, so to speak, or their progress, is the engagement of the carer or the parent. So it's my job to be as engaged as possible. And going back to being, I guess, living a similar life to my customers, I'm proud that I have the same sort of schedules as them. So I try not to make any excuses about them. Well, I've got 3 appointments. Well, that's just what it is. And don't try and run a race that someone else, like run it in a way that maybe another startup founder might run theirs.
It's a big step to go to full time, isn't it? Like it's a big leap to take.
Yeah, it was, and but really, really enjoyable, I think, because you could put your whole mind into it.
Yeah,
I think that was the sort of the big difference, and knowing that every day you're just showing up to work on this and not sort of having it in the back of your mind.
I guess it's not just the time, even just the time, it's also the headspace. It's like you are now.
Yeah, for me it was really. You're absolutely right, Matthew. Like for me it was that. And look, other people might be better at this. It might just be me, to be honest. So that changing from thinking about one thing to another, like, having one job to another job to another, like it's, I find that probably doesn't help, particularly in the early stages where you really need the creative juices going.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've definitely heard I've watched it's a common story.
I've watched our developers try and hold a conversation whilst making a coffee. Can't do it. Even though they make that coffee umpteen times a day, they can't actually hold a conversation and make a cup of coffee. You cheeky ass, Phil.
I've definitely heard though from founders before that same thing around, taking that step was when they got traction. They needed to commit full time, and I guess it's a lot about timing and, as you say, having resources. And I think you sort of touched on it just before, but I did want to ask about funding and whether you had, did you have quite a clear strategy around funding? Were you like aware of all the different types of startup funding, the VC, seed funding, whether you should bootstrap, the advantages to each, what was sort of in your head going on in your head around that?
Yeah, look, I'll be completely honest. I came from a long career in the corporate environment, and so I imagined it would just be like any other project you would do in a project sort of management sense. You spend the money, you build the product, and then people just come and use it, and your job's done. Unfortunately, that was not the case.
Build it and they will come.
Yeah, of course, right? It's sad to think that actually most corporate environments still think like that. But in terms of sort of funding, we started with our own funding to get started. What I didn't know about, I guess, was particularly in the social space, that there are sort of social impact type funding and grants and things like that. So I wasn't really aware of all of those things. I mean, to be honest, I was completely aware of all funding streams. That was something I really had to learn as I went.
Okay, yeah, and you've been, as Julie said, you've been quite successful in terms of getting into some of those streams and getting not just in terms of partnerships. And I know you've been offered by other providers time, say whether it's someone offering analytics time or someone offering some of the UX design time or some Microsoft offering some credits. And I've wondered sometimes whether that, because you have had quite a bit of that, whether it's almost does it become almost a burden in some ways, knowing, like consolidating that and knowing what to do, because then you're having to coordinate a lot of different resources and people wanting to give their time, even though it's all coming from a great place. That's more hands in the project.
Yeah, I think look, I've had to learn that, early days, of course, you're just going to say yes to everything because you're just so grateful for anyone that wants to help you in any way. But then I think to properly, I mean, I still sort of struggle with this now, but to properly sort of respect that offer of help, so to speak, you got to actually have a better idea of what you're trying to accomplish on your end. So I think we're getting better at just knowing, just being clear on the one or two things that we're trying to get right now at this point in time, and not trying to overload things too much.
Yeah. So
well, everybody always wants to get behind a good idea that's doing good in the community, don't they? So it stands to reason that you're going to receive offers. But as Matthew says, the how do you kind of put that to good work and make the most of it is a difficult proposition sometimes.
Yeah. But look, we're always just so appreciative of people who, it doesn't matter if they're offering to help or something or not, but just if they sort of engage and take the time to understand, I guess, the problem that we're trying to solve and take a little bit of time to listen to, this issue that most carers in our community face, I think is a huge win for us.
Awareness. Yeah.
So early days, limited resources, you're building a startup, there's all sorts of ideas, all sorts of potential features, big wish list. How do you, has it been difficult, and how have you handled that strategy of what to do and what not to do? What to build, what's essential? Have you had a strategy around that, or
I think
found that?
Yeah, well, I think we learned from our mistakes first. I would say our first sort of MVP was pretty feature laden. We had a lot in there, which is okay. But we learned from that. There was a lot there that great things, but maybe we didn't need them all at that time. Had I been better skilled in that sort of lean processes and things like that, I probably wouldn't have cooked it as much there. But then once we sort of learnt those lessons, we really sort of pulled it right back to just what our user was saying. This is the most important thing to me. This is what needs to work. And really for specifically for our app, it's around, well, we just want people being on the same page and talking to each other. So what's the minimum we need to do that? And then sort of go from there without sort of thinking too far. This feature turns into this extra nice to have, or this, yeah.
it's quite a mindset change, isn't it? To sort of just hone it in, focus on what's absolutely critical, like what's the core purpose of it.
And also, you need to survive, right? So you run out of cash, it's game over. So you really can't be betting, I guess, your resources on things that aren't, I guess, necessarily proven, like through feedback or requests.
Yeah. You mentioned the lean process there, so which is, for people listening who don't know, is the Lean Startup, which is a book, and it's sort of a whole process which has formed a sort of methodology around agile development and testing your ideas and iterative development and releasing MVPs, and that's that sort of stuff, and also around startup technology. Like, have you now made more of an effort to learn about that, keep in that loop? Because there's a whole, startup land has all of these terms and methods, and for someone just wanting to create a new product, you're not necessarily going to know any of that stuff. Like, do you now make an effort to keep up with that? And
so I never want to be one of those guys that goes on any sort of webinar or anything on social media recommending books that people should read and so on. I don't. I like to read. I just read for pleasure. So I don't want to be quoting sort of what people are saying in books and things. What I would say is, I like to learn just through conversations and listening to other founders. I find if someone's willing to share their story, particularly things that didn't work, that's usually the most helpful thing to me. If I found that, at this point now, when I go and listen to someone speak, I really value the ones that have done it themselves the most. I think that's what matters. I think that's the kind of advice I really want to hear. But back to that whole lean, minimal, whatever you want to call it, sort of thing. The only what I usually say to people who are starting out now, the simplest way I would explain it to people is, when you start, try and spend $0 if you can, in the stages where you're just validating things. And this is what sort of great mentors have been able to teach us, how you can sort of test your ideas with people just on paper, or just, with non-functioning designs and all that kind of stuff. Just really push that phase out as much as you can until you get some confidence, and knowing that the feedback that you get from people is actually the real value you're building, I guess, in your company at that time.
Yeah, one of the common struggles or challenges that we find working with some startups historically is this sense that they have to come to the market ready with everything, and they can't really talk about it until they've got something that's fairly complete to show people, which is the exact opposite of what you're saying, which is talk to people about it first. I think people get scared of not having enough to make their idea look substantial.
Yeah, I think people are sort of getting, because so many people are having a go now, which is like amazing. And you can have a go at something at whatever age as well, like, which is even more incredible. So I think people are getting more wise about those things, And the other thing is, like, it's pretty hard unless you are one of those teams where you've got a buddy startup founder that is the developer and can spend all their hours building something. How are you going to get something completely built? Like, the resources required to do that would be quite high anyway.
Yeah, interesting that you say that, because one of the things that we've learned through doing these webinars, or have come to realize, is how many of our startup clients are actually non-tech. They have no technical background, but they're starting these tech startups. And I have just come from this morning. We have an executive woman in tech meetup, and talking to probably 8 of the women in a little breakout session this morning, and none of them have got a technical background, and here they are with the head of these technical companies. It's great to see just how accessible the technology sector has become, probably in pretty recent times, actually.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just that all of that has just become, what would be the right term, just much more sort of democratized, so to speak, like more accessible, like you said. And because really technology is not like, I mean, no offense to some great technical people, particularly from Custom D, they're just tools that we use to solve real world problems. So
Yes,
it's
that's
how
right.
you then apply those tools and those those things that you can use. So I think it's more just like an even landscape where technical people and sort of non-technical, so to speak. It's not even like any sort of divide. It's just all the components you need to being able to solve a problem or create a product.
So setting aside the technical aspect for a second, what do you think, well, what is, in your opinion, the most critical ingredient to having a successful startup? What do you think it takes?
Critical. Survival is pretty good. I think things take longer than people expect. I think everyone probably goes in with dreams of, I don't know,
making it big
straight away, ping pong tables and all that kind of stuff, wearing skivvies. I think it takes longer, but if you can survive, it's actually quite good, because that time really means that you're learning things along the way and you're still going and so it's sort of survival and commitment and time, I think, is just
right.
effort,
So like
really.
perseverance. Don't give up at the first hurdle.
Yeah, that's right. And like I think it's easy. It depends, because there's all kinds of startups and none are better than others. There's people like me that work on something that I guess is very personal. And maybe for me it's a little bit easier to stick to something because it is really personal. There's other people that are working on things because it might be just commercially advantageous to have a go at something. They've just got an idea, and in that case maybe you want to just fail fast, so to speak. That's okay too. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
That perseverance is something we see in founders though who succeed. It's like the essential focus, that push, whatever you want to call it, or drive, is just something that you have, Danny, and something that I think is common, because you don't have a team around you to start with. You're going to have to do a lot of different, you're going to have to do whatever it takes, really, right? Like,
yes, look, there's some, there's I don't want too much ego around it. Like there's some sort of privilege around that as well, right? So before starting Sameview, my wife and I had good careers, and we're lucky to be in a position where we can live on, I guess, one person working full time and the other person having a go at this. Not everybody can do that, and so we're very lucky to be able to actually have a go at this the way that we've been able to.
So tell us about the dark days. Like when has it been really hard, and how did you get yourself through that?
That's a real downer in this conversation. No, well,
I think
I don't know. Like I think
there's comfort in knowing that you're not, this isn't just happening to you, and so the more struggles.
Look, I don't know if when I look at it, I don't think it's so much like a big sort of up and down sort of chart, like, oh, I've had a terrible day or anything like that. There's a few things that are really important. I mean, you of course you will get lots of rejections, people just saying no in many, many different ways. Sometimes you get all those no's on the same day, like on a Friday afternoon for some reason. That's okay. It's more, I think, for that kind of thing, it's sort of just accepting that that's actually just part of the everyday. It's just part of the sort of, that's what happens. People say yes, people say no, like, and just make sure you show up the next day. And then having other things around you, like just good support networks and people you can talk to, I think has been really important. I really, even though we're a small team, like I work around other founders. Like I have a community of people, in the social impact space that I work with, that I can share things with and support each other. I think those things are pretty important to, I guess, maintaining your well-being as you go through.
I suppose having your wife as so invested in this as well provides that kind of extra level of support, doesn't it? Because no one will ever care about your children as much as you do as parents. So this means as much to her as it does to you. And so, you know, that's a whole kind of wraparound really for the business and for your family.
Yeah, I think that is, it's probably something that people don't talk about that often, but like, I think for most people, you know, my wife has been involved in the startup all the way along. But I think it is one of those things that is really important that, you know, if you are going to sort of commit yourself to something, that you do on the family side of things, you do need everyone to be on board and supporting each other.
Do you have anything you do when you're those down days or Friday afternoons, sort of to de-stress or pick yourself back up, sort of go in a quiet room, play golf?
I mean, to be completely honest, like nothing is that bad. Like what could be that bad? Like what is there that could be that bad? You know, that could happen on any given day. You know, like
sounds like you've got just maintaining good perspective.
I think the worst thing that happened is if you know, to me, the worst things are when someone not so much gives us feedback that, you know, maybe something isn't working well for them, but it's you know, that it's really sort of made their lives actually harder because it hasn't worked the way they wanted to. That I find hard because I then feel like I've personally actually made their lives harder instead of easier, which is what I'm trying to do. And you know, I think with those things, I just try and engage with that person to just try and understand them better and learn from those things. But, you know, like downtime, I just do the same things as everyone else. Go home, relax, go to the gym. I don't know, what else? The usual.
I mean, and you're going to...
Oh, no, you go, Matthew.
I was going to say, you're going to get a wide range of feedback too, so it's not all going to be positive. And I guess it's a case of listening to it and seeing the patterns, right? Because when you're designing a product, you don't necessarily want to implement everything if the people are asking you, because everyone's got different workflows and different pain points, and it's you're dealing with them personally. I know that you have quite a personal connection, you know, especially this sort of the early stages. So it must be quite challenging.
Yeah, I honestly will look for any way to keep that going because I never want to lose that close connection that we have with our customers. That's really important. And I think you have to just be really good at listening and then just having like good visibility, all the things, all the sort of the deep discussions that you've had, and then being good at pulling out what those common themes are. So just, you know, taking good notes, but it's not just taking good notes. It's really just having that, I guess, a brain that can sort of remember all those discussions and sort of pull out the common themes.
Yep.
So does working on Sameview, does it make you happy?
This is my dream job. I just didn't know it when I was younger that this was. It's a job I've always wanted.
Well, why? What is it? Because it's helping you know, your family and other families. Is it because it's got purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you can do something, what is better than being able to do something for someone else? I mean, that's the best. So I can't imagine. Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing this. I still do.
What did you think would make you happy when you were younger or starting out in your career? What did you sort of aspire to?
I don't know. I think I was probably the last of that generation that sort of just, you know, had that whole thing. Oh, you got to go to uni, get a degree, go get a job, and sort of work your way up the ladder, so to speak.
Yeah.
I always liked. Look, to be honest, I've enjoyed every job that I've had. You know, I wouldn't go into a job that I didn't like, but I did always. In my prior career, I always wanted work where I could be closer to working with another human being. You know, because as an engineer, you could be working on things like systems and things like that, where you're like actively trying to build things so that humans don't have to talk to each other. But I always wanted jobs where I could be closer and closer to actual real people. And I think this job lets me be, you know, in touch with human beings 24/7.
Yeah, and the most, some of the most challenging aspects probably of their life too.
Yeah, and look, it's challenging, definitely, and people are going through difficult situations. But I would also share that, when I'm on the phone to these other, whether they're individuals looking after themselves or they're carers or parents, there's always a bit of a humor element to it. Just when you, I guess, on the level with someone, they're always great conversations. So that part is the favorite part of my job, just connecting with our community.
Do you notice a big difference to, this is probably a little bit off track, but a big difference in families that are just starting on this journey versus ones that perhaps a little more seasoned, that have, been living this for a longer period of time?
Well, look, what we understand is that, of course, it's extra hard when you first maybe either get a diagnosis, or for some families it's an incident, something that happens. That is very difficult. But we also understand that there is a day for most families further down the track where you start to feel a little bit more confident that, maybe you can start articulating your own aspirations, or you feel like you're a little bit control, you're kind of getting it. How am I going to being able to have your own say in where you want to go. Our mission is to shorten that time frame as much as possible to get them to that day, from that first day, as quick as we can.
So looking back, anything you would do differently, journey so far, if you were to do it again?
Doing differently, I think it would just be some of those lessons that we've learned about, how you actually sort of build a product up front. I think we learned a lot of those lessons early. I think getting something out there is a really good lesson. We did probably hold it back a little bit too long. Other things around, like little things like, I had to do a lot of thinking around, say, like our business model and pricing and stuff like that. And with a lot of those things, the answer is always the same. You just put it out there and people will tell you what they think of it. So there's no need to sort of spend too much time on your own deliberating anything.
Yeah. Get it out there. The earlier, the better, really.
Yeah.
I think that goes back to what Julie was mentioning before. It's a challenge sometimes to put things out there that might be not quite, not quite finished in your mind. They're not quite perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Bye, Matt.
So in terms of your your long-term vision, like, when will you know you've done it, like you've achieved, like what are you looking for in terms of your overall success vision?
Yeah, so it's important to say that we don't have one particular objective where we reach it and then we pop the champagne or anything like that. We don't think like that at all. In terms of success, we definitely, our vision, we want to achieve our vision. We want to be able to see that we're helping families to be more confident. We want to be able to measure that. Well, we want to be able to see that they're achieving their goals more effectively. So there's a lot of things where we will need to measure to show that. And once we're showing that, then we know that we're doing something right. But I think it's also important along the way not to think about success like that, like you've got some goal on the horizon, to actually try and derive some success as you go. So for me, it's the individual stories that we get back from customers, the nice feedback that we get from them. They're little successes as you go. I mean, they're big successes, to be honest, because it's a person's life that we're talking about. Anytime we get to be out there talking about the issues that we're trying to solve, issues for carers and advocating for better sort of coordinated care for them, all of those are little wins. Getting that message out there is important. And then also in the startup world, we've been doing this for a little while, not saying we're successful, but anything we've learned along the way, good or bad, if we can share it and it helps someone else, well, that's a win too. That's value that we've created for someone else. So I try and find those opportunities so that, we are maximizing, I guess, the value of what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, that sort of seems very sort of culturally aligned with what Sameview is all about, really, isn't it? It's about how can you do something good for someone else, and whether that's actually making their lives easier through your Sameview app, or sharing your story and helping them along the way. It's they're both the same thing, effectively.
Sometimes it puts us a little bit out of alignment with maybe, say, and nothing wrong with it whatsoever, but other I guess maybe startups where traditionally maybe you're looking for an exit, or you're looking for a raise or something, or you're looking for that, there's this sort of very sort of defined stages of progress. But that's okay. That's just we're just sort of doing a slightly different thing in trying to solve a very, very complex issue, I guess. So it just takes that time and commitment.
Well, sort of looking for an exit doesn't really feel like that would be a great motivation for starting.
I don't want to say that we're just sort of doing this without any commercial or scaling or any of those sort of considerations. It's just that at the heart of it, I have to trust that when you can solve a problem like this for somebody, that the all the other things will come with that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I think we've got to the end of our time. That was a really great and fascinating conversation, and I feel like I've learned a lot more, even though we've been working with you for a few years now. It's sort of understanding some of the more personal aspects of what you're doing is it's been really enriching.
Thank you. It's been lovely chatting to you both.
Likewise.
Okay,
and it's great just to hear that you're doing it's your dream job, Danny. I just like, because I guess we sometimes we wonder how we see the hard work and everything that goes into it, and it's like you still, so it's awesome to hear that.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, well, we'll say goodbye from here. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and till next time.
Thanks
everyone.
See ya.